Hey everyone, I'm Matt Waldman of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, and this is Portfolio Film Room, the RSP Film Room, and this is our third session, and I have the distinct honor of having good friend and colleague Josh Norris of Rotoworld, who is joining us today, and we're going to watch a couple of players. How you doing today, Josh?
Well, I'm great. I don't know how distinct of an honor it is, but I'm glad to be here. This is a good way to spend a Friday. I don't know when it's going up, probably just after this, but this will be fun.
Yeah, I'm certainly jazzed for this as well. I mean, anytime, I got a chance to meet Josh a couple of years ago at the Senior Bowl, and
Hmm.
Josh is really, guy. I mean, all modesty aside for Josh, Josh is a rising star in the draft and analysis industry.
I'm just trying to keep up here, Matt.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
well,
sir. I should say sir. Sorry.
yes, thing we've got going on here. He's so good at this, and it's like a little needle in me because really he's the guy who's doing just fantastic work over at Rotoworld, and hopefully we'll see more of him on TV. Some of the work that he did this spring and last year, and a little bit more this year, and just a fantastic guy to be watching film with. So this is going to be a great opportunity for us with the film room to do what we've been doing the past couple of episodes, which is to watch a couple of players, spend an hour, maybe a little bit more on two guys. We're going to use Draft Breakdown as our medium, and they are just a fantastic site that saves a lot of us a tremendous amount of time. And, they're just an invaluable resource. I recommend you to go to draftbreakdown.com if you are someone that has the mindset to want to watch film and learn more about the game. So we're going to watch this. There's going to be some dead air. We're going to point out things and rewind the tape and look at things in a slower fashion. We're not going to point out everything that we notice necessarily. There may be moments where we're breaking down one play for a long period of time, and others where we skip two or three plays. And, it's just an opportunity for us to learn from each other as well as for you guys to learn what we get to see. So we're going to start with Alabama running back T.J. Yeldon. And then I think we're going to make the next one Josh's choice, whether it's going to be,
Oh no.
yeah, offensive player, defensive player, or if he just wants me to drive, I've got a few receivers queued up that we can go with. So it all depends on what our guest would like to do here. But Yeldon is certainly one of the highly touted running backs who is likely to come out in this draft class. Certainly running behind that terrific Alabama team, and we're going to watch him first from a tape last year, which is from the All-State Sugar Bowl against Oklahoma. And then if we have time, we'll get into maybe some of his West Virginia tape in 2014, and then we'll go on to our next player here. So, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it. I will say, down the road, I see your recliner in the background. If this is truly relaxed, at some point, you have to get in your recliner and I have to get mine, and we'll have to do this from a really relaxed position.
I think that's good. And honestly, the reason that I have this office, because see, we just moved, and
Yeah.
and
Me
I,
too.
I worked at. See, there you go. And let's look at those digs for a minute there.
Oh no! Well, there's a bunch of boxes that you can see. That's IKEA. I built this table this week. Oh no, it's this thing. Built this table this week. Just
Sweet.
IKEA. Real, yeah. I'm a handyman here. Trying to grow up a little here, Matt.
See, that's awesome. Grown up yet? Because as you can see, my wife's working on the bookshelves here, and whenever we do the Audible Live, I've got people on Twitter going, so when are the books going to be off the floor and actually on the shelves? So she's been busy. Bless her, she does so much work. But see,
Yeah.
if you'll look at the rest here, we've got our other guest here, Zook, who's like hanging out on the couch.
Nice.
But eventually, this couch and this chair will probably be occupied, hopefully by you and me,
There we
while we
go.
watch some film, maybe in person for a few days, and we'll do some extended film room sessions and film this and provide this. But that's a little ways down the road.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get Yeldon up here, and I'm going to
Cool.
share the screen, and we'll get it started. There he is. All right, can you see it?
Yep.
All right, we are good to go. Let's present it to everybody. All right, so this is the first. Let's get it rolling.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
As we're doing this?
Sure.
Because I really do think that you are, if not the best, one of the best with skill position players, obviously, because that's really your focus. You do other things too, but that's what you spend the meat of your time on. How much and how often do you see running backs now at the college level running behind the fullback just from the I formation and not just split out next to the quarterback in the shotgun in a spread where things are much more condensed here, as you see with Alabama, than they would be in like a Baylor offense last year with the Lake Seastrong?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's a really great question. I mean, I tend to see it more. I don't know if this is necessarily true, but it seems like I see it more with the East Coast teams than I see it with the West Coast teams. But I would say that it's not as often as you would expect, or not as often anymore as it used to be in the past, maybe. I know one thing with Yeldon. What's interesting here is I do notice. I've talked about this a little bit this week. Is that he takes these little. He's kind of a little step back. You see his stride as being a very short-strided guy, and I'm not saying that is neither a positive or a negative. It's just a reflection of his style, and it plays into his patience as a runner. Just looking at how he gets to the line, makes one cut, gets downhill.
So when you see him running behind the fullback, obviously he's not doing that a lot. There's a lot of single sets. Obviously he's not following the fullback on every play, but do you think that does it ever factor into your evaluation that since he is following a fullback on some plays, then it's not really his vision that's running into a hole, that he's following someone else into the lane? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and I think that's a really great question to ask because I hadn't really thought about it in that fashion. But my first answer would be, would you knock a guy for his vision if he's running a gap play and he actually handles what he sees in front of him when it comes to negotiating the pulling guard as well as the defenders who are reacting to that.
Right.
And I would say probably not. If he has good vision, he's going to be able to manage that. And I think it's the same with the fullback.
Yeah, and just we haven't gotten there yet, or we might not even get there. But I would just question or possibly be open to the idea that there might be some gray area there. And I don't know how it is at the college level, obviously, because I never played at the college level. But if a running back is taught to just barrel into the backside of a running back, of a fullback, that follow him no matter what, he's going to lead you into the correct hole which you're supposed to run to, and if that can kind of be misconstrued as poor vision, and that type of thing. That's obviously a crazy question that we don't need to get into.
No, but it's
just some gray area that I'm trying to now step back and ask, well, is this possible? Could this be a possible sticking point in an evaluation?
That's a great question. I think it's a great question, and I wonder too. I would think that would be something that bears out as you watch more tape.
Yeah,
because if he's consistently running into the back of guys where you see he had an opportunity not to, then that might lend to that type of a thought about a player, as opposed to maybe watching something like this where he follows the hole, but you even see he sees that it's not there, and then he knows he has to make something and goes away from the hole.
Yeah. What we just saw in the last play, where he kind of spins forward just for a yard or two.
Yeah.
To me, that's something in a running back that is becoming more and more important. And I think we saw that last year a lot with Jeremy Hill. Jeremy Hill, I know there were tons of highlights and tons of big plays where you could see him that were repeated over and over again, just running through tacklers.
Yeah.
But to me, I'm not sure if he did it on a really consistent basis. But what I did like is that he was able to fall forward on that contact when he was going to go down for 1 or 2 yards rather than just falling down in a heap and not picking up anything. And it seems like he's even doing that in the NFL, especially last week when he really had a chance to have a lot of carries.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and maybe we ought to take a look at him in a little bit, because that would be a good point to look at. Sigmund Bloom and I were watching Duke Johnson in a previous episode and noticed that he always tends to fall forward and spin off like this,
right,
and get those extra yards, and that's
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just it's kind of a competency point for a running back.
Because a lot of these, and it's an awareness thing, it seems like, too, because a lot of these running backs might just try to barrel into the line of scrimmage when there are two linebackers closing on him right at the line, and just, upright and expose his chest, or just try to run right through them, whereas sometimes the much smarter idea would be just to dive at their knees level or dive at their feet and pick up those 1 or 2 yards and just maximize everything that you can instead of trying to split them and pick up a whole bunch of yards for the big play.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to just a conceptual understanding of the game that separates a great athlete from a great running back, because even an Amir Abdullah, who's not a great athlete, is a really good running back because those decision-making points, and a difference of maybe between Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, and Lawrence Maroney when they were at New England. Maroney never figured that out, but Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, an undrafted free agent, was very good at picking up what he could get.
Right.
And I think it's another highlight to show that the difference between an undrafted free agent at running back and a first-round guy isn't as great as it seems.
Yeah, I know some people, like Ryan Riddle always says this about defensive players, that if they try to rip the ball out or try to create a turnover, it means the game has slowed down for them. I might say that here with a running back that will fall forward or understands maximizing those small yards instead of just trying to stay up and make the big play every time, that the game might be slowing down for them a little bit.
That's a fantastic point and a very nuanced one to really talk about how the physical and the conceptual work together. That's awesome. Let's see what else we got going on through him. See a little patience point. I mean, again, I like the, it's the slow to the hole, fast through it type of thing. And he's not, I compared his step stride to kind of that of Herschel Walker, Keith Byers. I kind of
you're going through names that I have no reference point to.
Okay, so there we go. We'll talk about guys like he has that little step stride where it looks like he's like Fred Flintstone in the cartoons, like kind of running.
There we go. That's much better.
There you go. And it's a little bit of a Fred Flintstone approach to the hole. But then once he's able to set up the lead block, you see him be able to set that up and go through. And I think that that's a point showing he understands how the blocks are supposed to work, but also how to set them up. And that's a trait of vision of, it's not necessarily pressing the hole and cutting back, but he's pressing this block because he's on the outside shoulder of the blocker, and then he dips inside.
Right.
And then there's enough burst that he's breaking through this linebacker here, I believe linebacker number 20. And then a little side step two of the safety coming downhill.
So I haven't done a full evaluation on Yeldon, but what I do notice just watching him live and here is that he's a bit of a glider as a mover. I mean, like you said, it seems like his feet barely touch the ground. There's not a lot of effort in his motion. But really where it accelerates is when he's in the red zone. It seems like he can kind of shoot out of a cannon in those final 10 yards when he can break through that first and get to that second level, beyond that second level. That's where it really shows up to me. And obviously he's had some fumble issues in the past, which we might get to in this game. I can't remember. But yeah, kind of that gliding style. But then there is that extra burst that he can show, and he kind of shows it in different areas to me than some other running backs generally do.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's interesting is that one of this first play to me kind of shows a little bit of that downhill acceleration into the cut. Even though he falls down, boom, just kind of like, that's kind of what we see with that. And
it's like when he sniffs the end zone, he's like, oh, I can get there. I mean, and then he gets that extra step, that extra speed, that extra gear. So
yeah. Absolutely, and I think that you see that burst, and it's funny about the short strides, because I would say a back that he reminds me a little of is Rashard Mendenhall.
Okay.
And the fact that Mendenhall has that little stride, but he had some speed on him, and he's a big guy like him. And they're both kind of downhill guys who, when they get to the second level, they can issue a move and make somebody miss, but they're not going to make multiple moves.
Yep.
This is what I like about him because he's a big, strong back. I mean, you're talking about what 6'1", 220,
Right.
225. That's about Herschel Walker's size. For those of you who remember Walker when he played,
But
you know.
what's funny is he seems like the smallest back that's been in Alabama for the last 4 years because they had Trent Richardson, then they had obviously Eddie Lacy, and then he would spell Eddie Lacy, and now they have is it Derrick Henry,
Yeah.
who's an even a monster. And so whenever, because sometimes it's tough for me to not extrapolate, but get a sense for how big someone is with by separating them from who's already on the field. And
Yes.
so when you see him on the field after an Eddie Lacy run or after a Derrick Henry run, he seems like a smaller back, but he's not, like you mentioned. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and it's like talking about any type of physical characteristic. That's why I think it's so important to have a combine, so
Yeah.
important to have these pro days because when you're looking at people relative to somebody else,
Yep.
you could really be down on a player. You imagine the University of Miami with their backs when they had Frank Gore, Willis
Right.
McGahee,
Right.
Najee Davenport,
Right.
Edgerrin James, and Clinton Portis, all basically one after another.
Yeah.
You could have looked at Clinton Portis and said, after looking at Edgerrin James and Najee Davenport, and thinking, he's never going to make it in the NFL. He's too small.
Right.
He's not. He's an effort guy.
Right. And do you know? Well, two things. One, it seems like it's even working in reverse in this case because whenever these guys, that second or third back comes into the game to spell the starter. I mean, I remember when Eddie Lacy was the starter and Yeldon would come in, and everyone says Eddie Lacy's good, but man, Yeldon is the best. And then now with Derrick Henry, it seems like he's the one that's doing it to Yeldon now.
Yeah.
And then the other point about comparable sizes. Someone who's really stood out to me in that regard as being much smaller than I expected him or I ever thought he looked on a college field is Sammy Watkins. I remember at the preseason opener, I guess it was the Hall of Fame game, he just looked smaller than he ever had in college, which makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Not saying he's small, but just shorter, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's why it's always interesting when people give comparisons to players, and sometimes they see the plays and they compare the play that they saw to a play they saw from another player, but then they look at the physical end,
Mhm.
and it's these players are all mashups of each other. That's
Right.
kind of how I like to look at it, and one of the points about well, Derrick Henry looks better than T.J. Yeldon, but T.J. Yeldon looked better than Eddie Lacy. Some of
Right.
that too is, I'm sure what you're alluding to as well is that sometimes you'll see these guys in the fourth quarter, they're fresh legs, and they're a completely different style, and so the team's already kind of getting a feel for what Yeldon does, and then they bring Henry in, and it's like, oh man, that's
Right.
like a complete change up, and he's fresh, and the other team's worn down. See, now these cuts are interesting to me because a lot of small back guys don't make hard. A lot of guys with small strides, I don't often see make sharp cuts like this. And I think that this is a good example of a guy who can make that flexible downhill cut like this. And I like that he presses the hole because you see him press it here because he's almost parallel with the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a night, that's going to get for our readers or our listeners out here, you can see the defense moving downhill, and he's baiting them downhill along with the blocks and the way the blocks are moving. But then that one cut, and it's not any gathering steps to make that downhill cut, and he really cornered. Yeah, and it's a corner, and he's really cornering this. I mean, he's a little off balance, but not enough off balance to avoid that wrap by the backside defender here who's coming down the line. I mean, look at number 2. He shakes that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that's to the use of the arm. I mean, I really like when you look at a guy, sometimes you look at them and it's really how active they are with that free arm to ward off a contact or a wrap. Nice little leg drive and push. And that's a patient run too. I mean, Le'Veon Bell does that a lot.
Right.
You know, he's just a whole heck of a lot quicker.
Yeah.
What do you say about folks who maybe watch Alabama and, you know, they look at a Glenn Coffey or they look at some of the guys before, you know, this recent, you know, slew of good running backs? Because, you know, they still point out Trent Richardson, and
Mhm.
last year they would have pointed out Mark Ingram, even though Ingram is finally healthy and looking good. What do you say about this? Well, big offensive line. He's not as good. He's disguised by that. What are some things that you note that would differentiate a back from being good and just being behind a good line?
That's a good question. And I think it happens a lot, and not only with running backs, but with other positions, obviously. Um, I will say that obviously the talent along the offensive line is not the same every single year, and the same line that Glenn Coffey ran behind is not the same line that T.J. Yeldon ran behind. But it really just comes down to watching them. I'm not saying that. Oh, I think that there are cases of both where someone can look better in an offense because of how that offense is coached and how that offense is game planned. But then I think that oftentimes, as often as it is used as a piece of analysis, I don't want to call it lazy, but I think it is said without actually watching them and spotlighting them. Um, because not every run is going to look the same. There's going to be penetration from different sides. There's going to be a screw up in a block. He's going to have to shake a different talent on the defense at the second level, or I mean, all their skills are just different. Like as you mentioned, like there's a lot of mashup with them, but each prospect is different. There's no similar one or same exact one as there is another.
Yeah,
Um,
and maybe what you're saying too does, I mean, to even like tie a bow around some of that too is to say, if you're not watching, maybe you're not, maybe part of watching is understanding how the blocking scheme is working, understanding how the defense is reacting to it, and really studying like what's going on in front of it, and not
right.
just because if you just say it's a good line, you you better be able to prepare to be able to say, well, this line blocked a play where it's clear that this back should have gotten 4 yards based
Right.
on the crease.
And I'll even be interested to see how different this line is compared to when we get to the West Virginia game, and how different that blocking is, because obviously it's Lane Kiffin this year. So
Yes, and when you look at, and also when you look at the quality of the defense too. I mean,
right.
Oklahoma, I'm pretty sure they have a pretty good defense,
Yep.
you know, and so you're seeing a lot of like gains here where he's having to work after contact, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like us looking at this contest. You know, the fact that he can slip the first tackle in the open
It's
field,
great.
yeah, especially for his size. I mean, again, I mean, these aren't any slouches in the defensive backfield here. I mean, they may not all be NFL caliber guys, but to give a leg and take it away, not bad. Lots of slow to the hole with a little stutter and then burst through it. Just very sound stuff. This is where I think I would look at a criticism of Yeldon and say this is where he does, as to borrow Josh Norris's phrase that is so great, is this is where he wins. And Josh, can you talk a little bit about that particular concept and how you sum that up first?
Oh yeah. Just to me, it makes things a lot simpler because I believe that the core of an evaluation is determining where a player succeeds. And in turn, coaches should use that player in that role, because if you're setting a player up in a role of where he doesn't succeed, where he does not thrive, then in turn, you're asking him to do things he can't do. I think that happens much more often than it sounds simple, but I think it happens much more often than we think it does, or than it's recognized, because there are some great coaches in the NFL, but then there's ones that are very stubborn and think that it's their system and their system alone, and then they try to plug and play talent that doesn't exactly fit what they want them to do. And really, there are so many prospects and players in the NFL that are role players. I mean, the vast majority of the NFL is role players. There are only a few perfect prospects. So to me, instead of, and this is just how I think about it, instead of going down a checklist and saying, well, he can't do this, he doesn't do this very well, that's a lot easier than finding places where someone succeeds and putting him in those positions, and hopefully he winds up in those positions, if that makes sense.
I think that's a wonderful explanation, and I think that any analyst on television who wants to use that will set up a post office box for you to send a royalty check to Josh Norris, because he deserves it. But it's a really great way of looking at it, because a good example of that would be the Saints running backs. I mean, Pierre Thomas is a perfect example of being a back who's in a situation where he wins. He might not be that player in every system, but there'd be at least half, maybe half to 2/3 of the league could use him in a role, and he would be just as good or similar in some regards. But you might put him on another team, like to me, put him on the New York Jets, and he'd probably fail. I don't know. I just don't see that as his. He'd be like, I honestly think Bilal Powell. He'd be a little better than Bilal Powell. Yeah. Maybe that's a.
And then the opposite of it is someone, and I mean, some people might call him a bust, but the opposite is Deion Jordan to me, where I thought, and I loved Deion Jordan as a prospect. He was an outside linebacker / defensive end at Oregon. And to me, the worst part of his evaluation was as a pass rusher. I mean, that was the weakest part. He had to improve a lot in that area. But then he's drafted as a defensive end. They put him in a three-point stance at the end of the line and just ask him to get to the quarterback and get upfield. When you completely get rid of his Julian Peterson-type qualities of dropping in coverage, he covered slot receivers. At Oregon. I mean, he was out in space running down the seam. He's a ridiculous athlete, and you limit him as a player if all you want to do is, hey, just go get after the quarterback and get in the backfield, because even that's the weakest part of his evaluation to me, at least it was. And so maybe some could say that that's an outlet for me, because if he's not used in the role that I specified, then he's not, then it doesn't count as a miss or a bust or that type of stuff. But honestly, I mean, there are a lot of guys where role and fit is most important. And I think in a lot of situations, landing spot and what you're asked to do and succeeding in that spot, let's say at your second contract, players a lot of times are called, they're said that they improve or they were an upside pick and there's a lot of improvement in their game, when really to me they're just being used correctly. I think Jerry Hughes is a perfect example of that right now with the Buffalo Bills.
Yes.
I'm not sure if he really has improved as a prospect, but I think he was being misused, and I think that is mischaracterized a lot as improvement instead of being used correctly.
And I think that another terrific point with that, and it is. I mean, I know that there are a lot of fans who are consumers of products who are trying to find a way to determine who should I be listening to, who should I follow, who's good content that they are going to be able to provide. And so oftentimes the easiest way to think about that is to go, well, who did they hit on, who did they miss on, what was the hit rate, what's the miss rate? Whereas, and there's good marketing involved with that, and that involves, and we're all going to tout who we hit, and we'll talk about who we missed on. But I think really what comes down to more than anything, and I've certainly been very fortunate with the readers I have, is that they, because as you well know, I mean, I think you and I both, take our stance on guys that people are like,
oh yeah,
yeah. So but the thing is, it's the honest effort, and it's willing to explain why and show why, and understand that the readers we're trying to attract are nuanced, and they want to see the nuance, and you want to give a simple understanding of things and an overview, but you also want to give them the option to say, if you want to dig deeper, here you go. And I think Josh does a fantastic job of that.
Well, let me say one more point on that. A lot of times saying where a guy wins and having that as my evaluation can sometimes only be 3 sentences. So sometimes it's not very detailed. Whereas I'll say if someone wants thorough, detailed work, they should go to you. Because whereas I might have 3 sentences on a running back, you have 3 paragraphs on him and go through your notes and have exactly certain things where he does in certain areas and certain categories that he might not succeed in. He might can improve in and that type of thing. So I think there's a good balance between the two, and mine is honestly much more simple, and so I really respect people who can put in as much work in terms of typing all of their complete thoughts like you can.
Well, I appreciate that, but I mean, certainly it all dovetails together because you certainly have to do the work to be able to distill it to something simpler to do. So I mean, it's quite valuable. Let's go on and look a little bit more to look at Yeldon here, and this is a play. When I was going to talk about where he wins, this is where I think he loses. Okay, like I would not want to put him in a situation.
You're so negative, Matt.
I am.
Go ahead.
I'm telling you.
I'm just joking.
I know it. Well, it's Alabama. I'm a Georgia guy, I guess. I've never been to a Georgia game, but here we go. You know, it's the multiple layers of cuts. The fact that he's able to at least get this far is nice, but this, you know, I've seen him lose his feet a couple of times when he has to do this kind of layer of moves to this degree. This is not where he wins. Is if you can crowd him enough where he's got to make multiple moves, he's not going to be able to do it.
And it seemed like, at least from this angle, if he had kept his feet and his balance in that run, he could have picked up at least 4 more yards. I mean, I know there's a closing safety coming in beyond the second level.
But you see it. I mean, look at
this face.
Yeah. He sees it. To his credit, he knows exactly what he needs to do, and his feet almost are able to carry out what his mind does, which gives you some hope to say that maybe he loses here today, but maybe this is something he could improve upon or get a little better with his feet, because it's not like he already takes short strides as it is, which means that he's got some control over his feet. And you saw, you know, he sets all this up rather nicely. I mean, if we go, I'm going to slow it down one more to half speed and watch this, because I think that, you know, think of those ladder drills where the guys are like using their feet in and out and going either side to side through the ladder hole or climbing through the ladder with their feet with short choppy steps, and you can see some of that going on here with, you know, but it's just he could not keep that inside foot in. And right there, just stumbles and can't get that foot down, hits his toe, falls forward. But he sees it. Maybe he improves this, and it is no longer a weakness for him. So let's go back to top speed here, I think. Let's see what we got here before we... Yeah, I mean, just more leg drive and...
Yep. And staying up.
Yep. So let's see, we get to the quality of the setting, full speed. All right. I mean,
he has enough speed to outrun the defensive lineman running down the line.
Yeah, and if you can beat backside pursuit down the line, that's wide open here. I mean, this isn't a slow guy here. I mean, this is a smaller guy. And he gets past, and even with the downhill angle here, he turns the corner on this man just enough to get positive yards. I wouldn't say that T.J. Yeldon is an extraordinary back by any means, but he is an NFL caliber back. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
This is a guy that I think could wear down a defense, and that's why I kind of I see Rashad Mendenhall. They're about similar, almost similar. I don't know if they're similar size or not, but they're certainly, you know, they're within the ballpark of each other.
Mm-hmm. And
then, you know, after that, there's a good speed element, though I think Mendenhall might have been a little faster. We'll find out. And but the footwork and the cutting and the vision, I think there's a lot of similarities there. So if you want, we could watch a little bit of this.
Let's keep watching. Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing where he stretches it out, then works upfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
Presses and gets up. Even his body positioning, like the angle of his upper body when he's pressing, and then when he gets through, upright, then kind of leans over a bit when he's getting through. I mean, that's very detailed and maybe irrelevant, but I think it just shows he goes from vision to attack, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think Bloom did a good job describing Johnson in a previous episode in the same way, saying that he runs with a purpose. He knows what he's doing next. It's some people would call it instinctive, and it might be. You might call it also that he's done this enough that the game, like you said, has slowed down for him to the level that he's in control of what he's doing almost at all times. I remember watching this game earlier from watching Cooper last week.
Just as a side, have you watched Kevin White yet of West Virginia?
I have not.
Okay, you'll get to him.
So let's see if we got anything going there as a blocker that we can talk about, because certainly pass protection is an important element.
Right.
So what do you think of? Yeah, let's watch this. We'll watch this slowed time here. Yeah, because we're going to see the line. I think it's the linebacker coming through that he's going to come in through off guard, between guard and tackle, and we'll slow this one down. Let's contrast what either compare or contrast how you and Bloom think about this, because we had this discussion about pass protection. Bloom's likes to look at guys and say, look, if they make the effort, that's half the battle right there for me when I watch college players. Mm-hmm. For me, it's kind of like the baseline to me is, certainly I want to see a versatility of certain types of blocks, mm-hmm. but if the guy's willing to block stand up and be physical and be the attacker, to me that's a baseline, and then if he's willing to engage in that contact, then the rest can be taught from there. But if he looks like he's going to catch contact or avoid contact and just hope that he clips a guy with always cutting, or he, that kind of thing, and he doesn't move his feet and get his hands out well and really be the first to engage, that can be an issue.
So to me, I think sometimes half the battle is positioning, because a lot of times if you can just slow them down, unless no one's open and it really is a long progression, then the quarterback can get the ball out against the blitzer. So as sometimes enough is just being in position. When it's not enough, then I think it's obvious who can be set apart. Someone that can work against that counter move off that first contact, someone that catches even, like you mentioned. I would like to see some aggression there, but not just upper body aggression, also aggression to stay and mirror that blitzer or that free rusher. Because honestly, thus far, and I watched it last night with Devontae Freeman, I thought last night on one of Matt Ryan's sacks, he was in perfect position and delivered a good hit, but then the linebacker just went right through him on that second move and gave up the sack.
Yeah.
So aggression that not only is upper body and delivering a shot, but also aggression to keep your feet moving and staying in a mirroring and in a position that he still has to go around you.
I love that point, because if you don't move your feet after the contact, that guy is going to go right by you. And then there's also the diagnostic aspect, because what we're going to see here, I believe, is both linebackers come. Right. He's got to look at both, and they kind of crisscross each other, and
so he's already communicated with the tight end or the fullback that was back there, which one would most likely take which one.
Yeah.
And that's probably the call. I'll show how much I don't know, and I don't know how Lane Kiffin's obviously blocking scheme works, or what checks the quarterback has to make at the line in terms of calling out the mic and that type of stuff. But I think that if that is called out at the line, then that plays a factor into who the fullback takes and who the running back takes in this type of situation. And I wonder how often they would practice this. I mean, how often in practice would you see two linebackers blitzing? I mean, that might only be one or two or three times.
Yeah, and this is also studying from a base place where we're kind of in the dark here, because you have to be able to talk to the coaches to kind of understand, or the players to understand this. But I would just look at it simply and say, well, the fullback's offset, so he's the closest to the outside, so he's going to take the outside guy, and Yeldon's going to take the inside guy. So looking at this, that might be the case, because we see the outside guy come, the fullback engages. Now Yeldon is in position to he's got his feet square, but he catches the guy here.
He does.
He does, but he's big enough that it's like he holds him down and keeps the pocket clean.
At least he grabs something. He doesn't just hit him with his shoulder. His hands are there, and at least he grabs onto his side and gets a hand in front as well. And it doesn't seem like he just olays him right in the backfield. He does do some kind of placement to be in proper positioning.
Absolutely, and I think that obviously he's got the basics of what you're looking for to work with. This is an interesting play, and because of the blocking scheme. Usually when you follow a gap block like this, or wherever this guy's pulling, you would think that you're going to go behind him. This raises your question. He doesn't just head behind the gap,
right.
Behind the gap guy. He goes here, sees that the backside's cut off, and says, "Well, it's time to it's kind of cut over this way and just take what I could get."
Good.
Yeah.
77 is Ari. The left guard, I believe, is Cyrus Kwanjo's brother. It's Ari Kwanjo, and he's really good. I really like him. Just FYI.
Good. I always appreciate when you point out guys like this, because certainly, Josh watches such a wide range of players, and while I write for Football Outsiders and do some guys on the line and on defense, as Josh pointed out, most of my guys are skill players, so it's always a great opportunity to hear Josh talk about who are guys he likes, who are the players who don't handle the ball.
So with this one, did he miss his guy?
Good question. Let's look at it one more time here.
I think it's the replay.
Yeah.
See, it's tough to know because obviously there's somewhat of a fake, or he's probably told to go to the right side, and so this was some unaccounted for blitzer off the other side. And that's a tough assignment that you actually see a lot, where a running back most likely is called to one side, but then he has to recover and take up the man that's blitzing from the free side, and a lot of them can't do that, obviously.
Yeah, we were watching a Duke Johnson play where he would manage to do that against a play that earlier they blitzed off the right edge, almost looking like a nickel blitz, but it was the outside linebacker in the slot. And then on the next quarter, they showed that blitz again with the slot linebacker, and then blitzed Jeremiah Atashu from the opposite end, and Johnson leaned like he was going to run the swing route like he did earlier in the game, and then sees it and cuts back and just clips Atashu enough for the quarterback to get
which is all you need.
Yeah. So on this play, you see him, he's reading that front side blitz.
Right. And at least he notices that a blitz is coming.
Yeah. And then too late. But this to me would be an indication of more film study, he gets a little more aware of this, but seriously, this is more a good defensive call than it is a bad offensive execution.
Yep.
At least from the standpoint of the running back. Because then you have to wonder about what was the diagnosis with the offensive line that they had the left tackle pick up this end rather than pick up the blitzer. And maybe not the guard taking the end. So that could have been part of it too.
Right.
Always the endless little questions about. And that's a nice little shake, there's some niftiness going on with the fact that you can kind of use your upper body to do that little head fake.
Yep.
I've been calling this recently, you might like this, I don't know, but I've been saying that running backs, and probably other players too, but running backs and the variety of moves they make, whether it's upper body, lower body, head fakes, shoulder fakes, how they put them all together, it's kind of like using language. Mm-hmm. So how extensive of a vocabulary that they have is not only a good thing, but how they can pick it and use it, the word choice that they maybe have at the specific time. It's not Rashard Mendenhall, we always know Rashard Mendenhall for one move, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and so somebody like T.J. Yeldon, he isn't just a one-move guy necessarily, and that's a good thing to note here.
And
Defense.
he also anticipates contact with his free arm too, and he might not give him a stiff arm, but he's also using it to somewhat absorb the contact and try to get through it.
Absolutely. The play where he breaks that tackle from the backside player on that hard cut he made in the first quarter, that arm was near his waist, but when the guy goes to wrap him, he just flicks it enough that the instead of going around the waist, it bounces off the forearm.
This is the play that I was talking about earlier. I mean, it's from the 15.
Yeah.
When he sniffs the end zone. I mean, once it's not even the second level. It's not even the first level. It's right there. It's right at the second level, and it's a different gear. He just launches.
Yeah.
Like that is, I think. I mean, I'm gonna have to watch him a lot more to come to this conclusion. But it seems like he has even more acceleration once he sees the end zone, and once he sees there's an end to the play, he really thinks he can get there.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, I wonder if part of that is, again, when you see something ahead of time and you're processing information fast, you play faster.
Yep.
And I think
there is a goal at the end of a red zone play, obviously.
Yeah. It's like that whole Bruce Lee thing where he says you don't punch the target, you punch through the target, and I think that at this point, like right here, he's like, I'm setting up to get yards, and I'm setting up the target to get through the gap. Now I'm through the gap. Now what's my next task? Well, I got a guy in front to block. There it is. Now I'm punching through the target because I'm ready. The end zone's right there.
Right.
Just fluid. There's a nice little punch, I think. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, catching is a very relative term because obviously a defender, unless you're just the best of the best as a pass protector, a defender is going to knock you back. I mean, just where the momentum is and how you are stable and set in your stance to be in good positioning with someone's momentum, you're going to get jolted no matter what. But, I mean, it's not like he crumbles.
No, and you want to see what I saw here as opposed to the other play is that he actually, you see him make the effort first to get his arms out. It's like, boom. There's a little bit more of that there as opposed to like it caught him, and it might have just been a timing issue on one play, which is why you have to watch more than just like a couple of plays to say, does he tend to catch guys or does he, does
and
he
right in this freeze frame, they're even. I mean, I know that then the linebacker, because of his momentum, is able to get back inside. I would like to see maybe him, instead of attacking this outside shoulder, attack the inside.
Yes, and I would like to see him actually use his hands to punch rather than the forearm lead, which is what he did there.
An inside arm bar, even for offensive tackles, is really what stops the inside move, obviously. And for offensive tackles, you have to have a strong one, especially against very fast edge rushers that can step outside then get back in, because obviously your foot speed isn't as fast. I think the same is the case in this pass protecting instance, where if he just generated a stronger and had the mindset to put some of that force into an inside punch, it means the linebacker have to work around him.
Yes, and a guy like, to me, Giovanni Bernard had an understanding of angles at North Carolina to do a fair bit of that even as a smaller back.
Who's the, I don't know if someone instantly comes to mind, but who's the best example of a quality pass protector you've seen come out of college recently?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm sure because really it's like none of them, but it really does seem like even if they are good at it in college, it's a whole different animal in the NFL.
It is, because I think of so many of the adjustments that you have to make with the scheme as part of it.
Yeah.
And then there is some guys are good with the punch, but they're not good with moving their feet. Some guys move their feet really well, but they have to get better at being able to get their hands inside and control. And then some guys are great cut blockers,
Right.
and then you've got guys who are just a mess. I mean, it's just, I mean, like Andre Williams to me was a mess. Like, I
Yeah.
think I watched him pass protect 14 times against Miami last year,
Oh, really?
or block 14 times, and I think there was like a period of 7 attempts where he messed up in 7 different ways. Like, it was like almost, and it's not, I don't want to rag on Andre
Oh,
Williams
yeah.
this, but it's like, it was funny as someone who watches it to go, wow, it's like I didn't think someone could like miss this 7 different ways, and I think that would be like me trying to like do something that my wife does, trying to
Right.
fix stuff around the house. I'd probably figure out a way to screw it up 7 different ways.
And I know other people have said this, but a lot of times pass protection is the answer to why isn't this guy playing?
Yep.
Because that's something we don't see very often. That's something that might have shown up in the preseason, but people aren't going to watch rookies in the third and fourth quarter. It probably shows up more often in practices, and so coaches now have a much better understanding than those of us on the outside watching it. Many more examples of it, I should say, at least. So talented runners, obviously, they're still talented runners, but if you put them in, you are severely limited in what you can do with them if obviously they cannot pass protect.
Yeah, and Lake Seastrunk is a great example of a guy who has the talent as a runner, but pass protection has been an issue with him, and there are other issues probably with him too. But but he's that if he gets the professional element of wanting to be a consistent professional with how he approaches the game, then what you're going to see the difference between him getting off the practice squad in Carolina and actually contributing to the game will probably fall to how much of a student he becomes in the area of pass protection.
And it seems like more and more guys are being drafted because they have pass protection. Dave Gettleman of the Panthers that you just mentioned, and like his first or second comment last year when Tyler Gaffney was drafted mentioned his pass protection. Mentioned that as possibly his top trait. I didn't think he had many others, even if he had that one. So I think finding roles, like you said, where someone wins, and if that's Tyler Gaffney, if that's the area where he wins, then hey, that's a pretty good one because that's something that a lot of other people don't do.
Yeah, and what we're going to see here with Yeldon, I think one of the consistent themes with Yeldon and where he works out well is these zone plays. He's a downhill zone runner, and watch again what Josh notes about when he smells that end zone, it's on, like right here.
That's the fastest we've seen him move.
Yeah, and I mean that's a
leap.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous looking adjustment right there.
Right.
I mean yeah, it is. It's pretty. He just sells out for that, and it's this is late in the half, tie game, first and goal. I'm getting this. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful play. And
he's not even thinking about leaping at the 4.
No.
I mean, because he doesn't have time to say, well, this guy's incoming, the safety's going to close at some point, so I'm going to leap here. It's just reactionary. I mean, once he sees it, he's going to get it.
I think if he thought about leaping at the 4, he'd probably be, if he was like completely honest with somebody outside of media, he'd probably say, yeah, there's no way I would have gotten there. He's probably looking at this and everybody's going, he's probably thinking, I didn't think I was going to get in,
And if you think you're going to leap at the 4, you're leaping from the 6. It's like dunk contest when you see someone jump from the foul line, or they're going to leap at the 2. You don't think, oh, this is how far I can jump. You just either undersell it or oversell it.
Yeah, and the one thing that that he's always going to get an opportunity at here is this situation in the NFL. They'll get these early, I think, because they'll give him a shot because he gets low, He attacks the line
and falls forward.
Yep. He doesn't lose. I don't see him lose many yards, except if he was drafted by a team like Atlanta, like last night, where Atlanta likes to run the big guy outside, right. and you think, what the heck are you guys doing? You can't even block on the perimeter right now as it is.
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
In the past, everyone has always classified goal line backs as big backs. I mean, maybe not Brandon Jacobs big, but Andre Williams, some bigger framed running backs. Whereas I think some smaller backs that fall forward, that maybe don't break arm tackles and run free in the end zone, but can fall forward and knife through small lanes that they know can pick up the yards necessary or the distance necessary, might be the way to go. I mean, Shane Vereen with the Patriots is an interesting example of that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, I think that's just teams getting lazy with their templates, because I agree completely. I mean, I keep bringing up Duke Johnson, but Duke Johnson to me is an example of a guy who can bounce off a hit. He's not a power back, but he's going to be able to. He's shifty enough and can make and decisive. And Ray Rice isn't huge,
Right.
He certainly did. Chris Johnson scored 10 touchdowns. They all weren't from the 50.
Let me ask you this. You might know the answer to this question. How was Warwick Dunn as a goal line back?
I thought Warwick Dunn. That's a good question.
Because he always seemed like one that obviously always understood contact and didn't want to take big hits and would get down, but also had that mentality of, I can pick up a few yards here instead of taking 2 big hits and not picking up anything.
I think that's true. When I think of Warwick Dunn, what's funny is I actually think of him as a good between the tackles runner, and he was the precursor to Darren Sproles. I mean, he was, and so I would say, he was capable in that regard. It's just that teams didn't always want to use him consistently that way.
And even the Falcons then, I think they had T.J. Duckett, right? So fitting with that classification and that mold, they would use him as a short yardage guy, at least if I'm remembering correctly.
I think you are, and Dan Reeves was certainly as old school gets.
Yeah.
But here's a guy that you may not be aware of, but I remember seeing him do pretty good in short yardage. He was a San Diego Chargers back by the name of Lionel Little Train James.
Nope.
And he was 5'6" or 5'5" before Darren Sproles was even a thought in his mother's mind, I think. And he was he could. I remember seeing him on short yardage plays and thinking that's pretty good for a small guy. But like you said, it's knifing through, finding the crease and hitting it decisively.
Right. We never see him on contact, even with a swarm of defenders, be driven back and falling on his back. I mean, we've seen him driven back in a dog pile, but he stays on his feet. But there's a lot of times also when he just falls forward. You rarely see him, and this is, again, very minor and maybe not even a point, but you don't see him being lifted, driven back.
I think it's a great point, because it's a common thing about running backs in general who are NFL caliber guys, and if you see that in a guy that everyone's like gone crazy about and says, he might be unbelievably fast, he might have great physical ability, but if he doesn't run behind his pads, and I think that's really what that is, running behind your pads isn't necessarily power, it's leverage, and if you run with good leverage like this is the difference between Yeldon or
it's a half yard. It's a huge half yard.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, Darren McFadden in this situation, gets stopped right here.
Yep.
Or at least right there, because he doesn't spin and get down like that. He's too high his pads are too high. He doesn't run with that downhill level unless he's got like a 5-yard head start, and he's not nearly as nifty as this. When it comes to hitting a hole or finding an alternate crease. And that's a great example of a guy. This is why Maurice Jones-Drew, even though your buddy Evan Silver, your coworker Evan Silver, I saw on Twitter the other day say, it's just disheartening to me to see that Maurice Jones-Drew is the starter, a counter argument might be, well, maybe it's because Darren McFadden hasn't proven that he has the nuance of an NFL runner on enough play choices to have confidence in him in these situations.
Speaking of McFadden, have you watched Tevin Coleman at all from Indiana?
I have not yet. Not yet.
You'll get to him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But somewhat similar running styles. I think there might be some slight nuance differences, like with that third down or picking up yards on that contact. But running style-wise, I think that they're somewhat similar. I don't want to brainwash you or anything with a bad idea, but
it's cool. I like hearing what you think of these guys. So please share away.
So 4th and 6 here is. Did they just run? Oh no. Okay.
Yeah, this
play
is
action.
Yeah, I think. Let's see if we have a cut here from. See if he blocks this guy off the edge. And he gets in the guy's way. It wasn't anything great. He probably didn't diagnose it unbelievably, but again, it's one play. If I see like 3 or 4 of these in the same game, or consistently in multiple games where he's shooting too low, not shooting for the right leg, then I get a little worried.
See, that's another one where we just don't know. We don't know which guy he's supposed to take here.
Yep. I mean, people will say, there's a general rule you always hear, and I want to ask you about that because I always heard the general rule was
taking the inside guy.
Inside out, yeah. Always block inside out, and because the outside guy, the general rule is, and you're right, we don't know for sure, but the general rule would be the outside guy takes longer to get to the pocket than the inside guy. So give the quarterback at least an opportunity to make that outside guy miss.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where I go, and if I err, I'd rather err on that general rule. This is a guy, I mean, to me, T.J. Yeldon is just going to wear down a defense if you put him in the right situation.
That's great. That angle where you just see creases and cracks, and he just makes them count.
Look at that.
That's
an
nothing.
NFL-sized crease. That is like the play I showed last week of Melvin Gordon.
Oh yeah,
where
Gordon does it really well.
Yes. This is why people liked Ryan Matthews. Even people are like, oh, there were certain issues. But one thing that Ryan Matthews always could do well was hit a little crease like that. And Gordon does that well. The fact that he anticipates this, you have to anticipate a crease like this.
Yep.
You have to understand your blocking scheme. He understands that the tackle and guard are blocking down on the second level, and then he's going to slide off to whoever's available within this area, and that his job is to split this crease, not to get outside it, or else he's opening himself to this outside contain. And there's a little flexibility there to do that. No hesitation, like you say. That's a beautiful run.
And there's no thought in breaking it east and west.
Yeah. And I guarantee you this was the biggest problem that I had with Darren McFadden, to bring this up one more time. And it's more just because I want to emphasize people. Yeah, it's not to say I told you about Darren McFadden, because trust me, I didn't think Darren McFadden was going to be as good as he was. So that's, in that sense, I think I was wrong about him, because he can bend runs in a way that's just sickening. And you use him where he wins, as Josh does so well. He can be a good back. I just don't think Oakland's figured that out. And maybe Oakland isn't the greatest place for him, and it might be a little too late for his career. But McFadden on this case right here, McFadden might not have squeezed through that. Yeah. He probably would have hesitated a little bit more, or probably just run right through here and hope that he could run over this guy.
I think Lake Seastrunk was also, he had much more open space, but he was also a guy that seemed like he always wanted to get east and west and to the sideline. I know they're very different backs, rather than just north and south and fit through those crevices and those cracks. So.
Yeah, but that's a great point too, because it doesn't matter what size you are, you've got to run between the tackles in the NFL.
Right.
And you have to show that you can you can squeeze through these small creases, because those are NFL-sized creases. If you can fit a shoulder in and angle it, that's an NFL-sized crease, and you should have hit it.
He attacked the inside shoulder there,
Yeah.
and the guy had to go around him, and he still kept his feet. You know, I mean, obviously it wasn't a punch to stall the guy, but inside shoulder, stepped up.
Little arm bar, yeah. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, good stuff. So before we continue, do you want to continue with him? Do you want to watch somebody else? How are you on time?
Why don't we watch a little bit of someone else?
Okay.
Maybe like one video.
Okay.
I was going to go, and I realized that there weren't any of him on Draft Breakdown, so we probably can't do it.
Okay.
I was hoping to watch Everett Golson with you.
Oh, wow.
But I don't think there is a video of him.
Yeah, I don't think just yet.
Have you gotten to watch him at all?
Not yet. I heard that Kian did a piece that came out yesterday. Rotoworld, correct?
He is vastly improved.
Cool. So who you think? You pick anybody you want, and we'll you want to pick a position, and we'll start from there, or do you want to pick a
here, let me.
Yeah.
Why don't we just stick with running back? Is that fine?
Yeah, we can stick with running back. That's fine.
Why don't we look at Tevin Coleman, since you haven't looked at him?
All right, sweet. Yeah. I'm always happy to do that. We've got Indiana State and Bowling Green from last year. Do you have a preference?
Well, 2 primetime performances. So no, performers. I mean, why don't we go with Indiana State? I mean, he's gonna rip them apart, but let's see if we can tell anything from it.
Yeah, and I think this is a great exercise too, because people often say, oh, especially when you watch small school players and you don't always get a chance to see them against big school teams.
Yeah.
And people go, well, how do you know that this guy's going to be good? And I think, I want to ask you this question, but some of the things I look for is, it's the same decision-making things that he has to do,
yep.
With some of these situations. Maybe you don't see how fast, how powerful, how
yep.
quick he is, but you do get to see his decision-making, his technique, and his consistency, and then you can kind of project a little bit, because it's the same projection game as you're playing in the NFL. You got to watch NFL players and go, how does this fit to the college game, and what's the differences?
Well, yeah, they're playing against. And 2, there might be a lot of easy plays, so you might have to rifle through a whole bunch of those to find one where it's actually a contested situation, where there is something where he actually has to show. And so sometimes, even though playing against these teams might be easier on him, it might be more difficult on the evaluator to find plays that actually show something. And they're going to play in any game, or else the score would be 200-0, so.
Yeah, and in opposite cases, I remember that some of the best evaluations I've given running backs are the most impressive games I've seen from players that were really telling. I remember Ahmad Bradshaw averaging less than 2 yards a carry against Tennessee's top defense. I remember Matt Forte averaging less than 2 yards a carry against LSU's top defense.
Yep.
And Joseph Adai averaging less than 2 yards a carry against Auburn's top defense. All teams that were like national championship caliber defenses.
And there was something last year where in SEC play, Odell Beckham Jr. had like no catches and barely any yards. And then, so I went back and looked at them, and there was a reason why. He was barely targeting a bunch of them. Some of them, their defense was called on pass interference plays, some uncatchable throws. He pretty much caught all of the targets he was thrown to that were catchable in those games. So it really does matter about the situation. And then that's why we watch. Honestly, that's why we watch.
Yeah. I can already see in the stride and style why you when I mentioned McFadden
and build, yeah.
Yeah. Charles Sims kind of had that build a little bit too, but nice little footwork there. Wow. Okay, they were going to show that again, so let's watch that again. He's got that little flipper going with the arm and the touch drill. Very active free arm there. I do like that for his balance.
And you can already tell the difference, I think, on that last play, kind of between his cut and decisiveness and Yeldon's and his, because it seemed like he was a bit more unsure of what was going to happen and much more wary of what could happen at the second level than Yeldon was when he would press a hole and then get upfield. If you agree with that or disagree with that.
Well, one thing you can see right away is he's not even parallel with the line of scrimmage, and he's looking to where he's supposed to run and cut back rather than disguise it the way you see a guy who presses and cuts back. So that's a great point. And then, of course, the safety's screaming down.
Right. That's true.
He sees that but he already but you have to wonder, is it the chicken or the egg? Yeah. Does he tip off the safety by looking to where he's going to run? Because we'll watch the safety. He looks right there. The safety's looking. Now the safety's like, yeah, I'm heading downhill. I honestly think he tips off the safety a little bit. And then here it's not a bad cut. It's not a bad cut, but it's not a great one either. But he doesn't disguise anything. That's a great point, Josh. That's funny. Let's watch this in full time here now, but in normal time. But he sure loves to punish with that free arm. I like that. I like that he varies his stride. I mean, all good running backs, I think, vary their footwork well. That they can vary the length of their footwork, because that shows a control of what their eyes see, what their minds process, and that being expressed in their feet. Little steps to press this collapse inside, shoots that gap, and then it's all speed from there.
Oh, good. We get to see this. See, that's just gaping, though.
Yes.
Just gaping.
Yes.
I mean, you can't even see a defender at the second level on the screen.
No, you could drive a Volkswagen through this hole right here. About right there. Yeah, they might run over the heel of this of the tackle here, collapsing inside. But right here, yeah, I mean let's see, one.
The referee's in the best position to get him.
3, 4, yeah. I mean, you could fit 4 of Tevin Coleman's through this hole right now. All right, come on now. Let's start it back up. All right. Oh, yeah, there we go. It's just freeze frame, and they were just showing for highlight, too. He does have that McFadden kind of sim style of bending things at times, and the body type.
Yeah. I hate to see these just tackles in the backfield on the one guy that can stop him in the backfield.
Yeah.
Now, again, don't know how hard that is to prevent, but I do know when guys do prevent it, I really prefer those types of backs, obviously.
Yeah, the ability
Zach Stacy comes to mind to me. I mean, he was hitting the backfield a lot when I watched him in college, and he would frequently beat first contact in the backfield.
Yeah, and I think that's a product of anticipation and footwork and all of those things, that it's the mind and the quickness, athletic ability all integrated, and that's probably one of the key places where you're going to see a back separate himself from the field, is if he can do that. That's kind of saying, I can be an NFL starter, because that's routine.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to make that somewhat routine. I almost think he's kind of slow to get off to get to his top speed.
Yep.
Even when he means to get to his top speed. Like here, this looks like a pretty huge hole.
Yep.
And it took I don't know. He was varying his step stride a little bit because he saw what was going on in the second level. Let's see. Like he's looking at these guys, I think, about right here and trying to read where he's going to go. And there's also the safety. I like that he gets his knees high to deliver a little of the goods at the end. Here's a question for you, Josh. Is there a guy, when you look at running backs, are you one of those people that looks at them and say, you know what, there's a big diversity of players that can work well, or I really think that I really hope that I can find a player whose measurements are at this certain sweet spot, and the sweet spot's more narrow?
I think it's more about what teams want to accomplish, not to cop out. I mean, I do think, honestly, now a premier back at the NFL level is somewhat undervalued. I don't know why I'm thinking this right now, but like it seems like everyone right now is about a committee approach. Right. Whereas I think if you have one person that can be a focal point of your offensive attack and your rushing attack, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think a lot of, because a committee approach had been successful for so long, either because of injuries or because of talent, some coaches are now stuck in their ways about having a committee. I think possibly Lovie Smith is like that right now in Tampa Bay, even though maybe Doug Martin isn't quite what he showed as his rookie, and as much as I liked him. I'm not exactly sure how to answer your question. I think that there are a lot of talented running backs. I think there are running backs that can be productive at the NFL level, but I think that there's also a clear tier that is above that can carry it on their own. If that makes sense.
It does, and I think that I think also, I mean, I just wonder, like, when you evaluate guys, and like, I mean, I think your answer about fit just applies here very well, because I'm not one who's in love with saying, you know, while I would say the best feature backs, if you're looking at slowly feature backs, I might say, well, you know, there's a sweet spot between, you know, 5'9" and 210 pounds and 6'1", 125 pounds that I would say maybe they fit in that bell curve, and that's all great. But I'm not necessarily going to say, well, he's 6'3", 230 pounds. I don't know if he's going to, you know, he might take too many hits, and he might not be all that great, because, you know, I don't remember watching Eddie George or Eric Dickerson, you know? But it's, you know, or he's 5'9" and, you know, 195, you know, or he's 5'10" and 195, and, you know, he'd have to add at least another 15 pounds to be any good, Terrell Davis. So he definitely, I mean, he's a physical back. You see some physicality to him. My first questions with him are probably vision. That's where I'm kind of honing in, where I'm going, what I'm going to be watching more from is how good is his vision. Like on this particular play, this linebacker comes to Phil.
Yep.
And I wonder how early he could have read that, because you're reading the helmets and where the helmets are located here, and you got one outside, so you can see that he knows he's supposed to go into this gap where it's kind of a little bit of a wind back play. But, you know, a great back, LaShawn McCoy, and I'm talking maybe McCoy and Charles, might see that they could bounce out here and do something, but that's two guys who could do it and might see it. And then there's maybe like 30 or 40 guys
can see it and can't do it.
Yeah, who can see it and go, I ain't going there.
Yeah.
You know? And at least he didn't do that. He just said, I'm going to take what's in front of me and try and lower the pads. But
So he didn't even pick up the first there.
no, he lost the collision completely. And
Yep.
there's a guy on the side here, though, so it would have been hard for him to spin off because
Right.
this edge guy comes inside and fills that option and takes his legs out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be fair. I mean, there's a chance where he gets to use his legs and he gets a little bit of yardage. Nothing great after the contact, that is. I have to say, even just right now, and this is, my mind tends to change after I watch guys over a period of time, but
Yeah.
but I like Yeldon more than I like Coleman. But I see where Coleman has that. Coleman has some nice skills. I just think from a standpoint of his vision and how he uses his body, like you said earlier, I see evidence where he's not as in control of what he does. That's a nice little move, and
Yeah.
this is probably one of his better runs right there. Nice little
Evading in the backfield.
Yeah.
And then, going a different direction when he gets there.
Definitely a nice little jump cut.
Not that it really matters, but man, he's holding the ball in the wrong arm a lot more than you usually see, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I do think that matters. I mean, it's not like a huge thing. It's not like you're going to go, well, put him on the bench or don't draft him. But, yeah.
It's something that Mike Evans is having to fix right now.
Yes. And, I mean, unless you're, the one back I remember who always carried it under the same arm and did fairly well was Amon Green. But there's always exceptions to the rule. But,
and then part of it is, I mean, he can't use that left arm because he's putting it in the left arm to evade or to absorb incoming tackler that's flowing towards that side. So.
And he doesn't look as fast as Amon Green did to me. I don't know. So I mean, that's not bad though. That's some speed. To be able to reverse your field like that he's certainly a good athlete, and he is winning as an athlete here. Little stiff arm, and I like it that he attacks at the end. I mean, he's
because a lot of people would just go out of bounds.
Yeah. And he's got those short, choppy strides at times too. Again, he's a very good college back for sure. And I like, I mean,
that's a phrase that I want to use more often. That he's a good college player, because I think there's a major difference, and this is an obvious statement, between a good college player and a good prospect. And we see that a lot. I think we've seen that a lot recently. And a good college player can rack up a bunch of production, but that does not necessarily mean they're a good prospect.
Yeah, and I think that looking at Coleman, he's a very good college player. I do wonder about his vision. I wonder about how he finishes some plays. I want to see more with pass protection. These are all things that he can probably get better at. Um, Vision to a certain degree. I don't know how great of a degree that will be, but I mean, if he were to be, if tomorrow was the draft and someone said, based on one thing you see, you know, limiting it and putting us in a corner there, I would probably say he would certainly be I think he would be drafted later.
Yeah.
And I think that he would be, or he'd at least be a camp invite, and people would be going, I can't believe he didn't get drafted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he'd be one of those talents. But I would think that unless, you know, it's kind of like he's in a place that's a little better than where I think Jerick McKinnon is right now. It's just that McKinnon has all the opportunity now to share time with Asiata. But I think that he's kind of in that boat right there.
By the way, you are doing no favors to bloggers everywhere right now with watching football with a cat on your lap. So.
Yeah, this is look, he's 13 and he just does what he wants to do. So
it seems that way.
Yeah, so you know, the joke is on our Audible show on Football Guys is that whenever somebody mentions a player that isn't very good, he seems to jump up into my lap or get on the screen. So I don't know if that's a good sign or omen for Tevin Coleman or not. But but this was when we started watching the Coleman tape. He kind of jumped up here. See, that's the real deal. Is that it's not me, folks. I don't really study film.
This is the truth behind the RSP. We know where it's really coming from.
This is the barometer. If he's no good, then he's up here all the time because it's the. He's the Lawrence Taylor of cats when he sees an easy mark.
Or maybe it was just the Darren McFadden mentions. It was one of the two.
It could have very well have been Darren McFadden because he does kind of look like he's looking for a can of tuna right now.
Matt, this was cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And it was a pleasure, and we'll do it again.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Take care.